News from Israel now. After weeks of tough negotiations with religious and far-right coalition partners, Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that he has succeeded in securing a deal to form a government. It will be the most right-wing coalition in Israel's history. Netanyahu made the announcement on Twitter minutes before a midnight deadline set by President Isaac Herzog. The announcement came after Netanyahu's conservative Likud party and like-minded religious nationalist parties close to the ultra-Orthodox and West Bank settler communities won a comfortable majority in the first November election, promising him 64 of Parliament's 120 seats. But the agreement to form a government was held up by disputes over a package of proposed legislations on issues ranging from planning authority in the West Bank to ministerial control over the police. The new government, which Netanyahu must now present within a week, will take office after a year that has seen the worst levels of violence in the West Bank in more than a decade, with over 150 Palestinians and more than 20 Israelis killed.
רציתי להודיע לך שבזכות התמיכה הציבורית האדירה שזכינו לה בבחירות, עלה בידי להרכיב ממשלה שתדאג לכל אזרחי ישראל, ואני מתכוון כמובן להקים אותה בהקדם האפשרי.
Israel will finally get a stable government after a turbulent period that saw Israelis go to polls 5 times in less than 4 years. But the weeks of negotiations have made it clear that the coalition may still face significant internal tensions. Netanyahu has said he will ultimately set the Israeli policy and has pledged to govern in the interest of all citizens of Israel. But the inclusion of the hardliners in the government has shocked Palestinians and liberal Israelis. Reports say Ben-Gvir of the Jewish Power Party is set to serve as security minister with authority over the police. He is an extremist politician known for his anti-Arab rhetoric. He was once convicted of incitement to racism and supporting a terrorist organization. Bezalel Smotrich of the far-right religious Zionism party believes Israel should annex the occupied territory. He is set to get control over planning in the West Bank, giving him wide powers over the lives of Palestinians. Another far-right ally, Avi Maoz, is the head of an anti-LGBTQ party. He will reportedly be placed in control of parts of Israel's national education system. Aryeh Deri, head of the religious Shas party, is bidding to become the finance minister. This despite a conviction for tax fraud. Netanyahu, who's returning after serving a record 15 years as Prime Minister, is on trial for corruption charges that he denies. For more on this story, we're now joined by Amit Einstein, who is a diplomatic correspondent at Israel Can TV. Thank you so much for speaking to WION. Now, why do you think that the government that Benjamin Netanyahu will soon head is being described as the most right-wing coalition in Israel's history? And what ramifications is it likely to have both domestically and internationally? Take, for example, the highly controversial figure called Ben-Gvir, who it seems has been asking for the home portfolio, and countries like the US have already expressed reservations.
So historically, Netanyahu, when he forms a government, usually he wants another central party, another party from the left inside this coalition. This has been the situation every time since 2009 when he returned to being prime minister. But now it's the first time that there's no party from the center or no party from the left. You know, some people in Israel joke that Netanyahu is the left figure in this government. So that's why when people describe this government, they call it the most far-right government you have ever seen in Israeli politics, because at the end, you don't have any central or right-wing element. And even the Likud itself, which would usually have members sometimes in the middle, you don't have this time. The Likud ruling party does not have these kind of figures. So that's the situation right now when we're talking about forming the coalition. Now, the big question is, what will happen from the promises during the government itself? Meaning, you know, there's agreements, there's statements, but at the end, the question, what will happen the day after? And who will run the issues? Usually, Netanyahu succeeded in managing his coalition partners, you know, to move them from the right to the central. Now it's going to be a big problem for him. So it's going to be very interesting to see how much of these statements on sea areas and other issues will, at the end, happen the day after the government. And you always need to remember one thing. Netanyahu aims for the world, meaning he wants to go abroad. He wants to bring a peace agreement with Saudi Arabia. But his coalition partners will probably make him work inside Israel, meaning West Bank issues, crisis with the American government, and all these kinds of things that will again bring us the big question, who rules this coalition?
It's quite interesting. If people say that Benjamin Netanyahu is the left leader, well, that says a lot about this coalition. But let me ask you this. How stable is this coalition likely to be? Not only has Israel seen 5 elections in less than 4 years, it took weeks and weeks of negotiations before Netanyahu to be able to make the announcement that he was finally in a position to form this government. Also, very quickly, are we likely to see Israel's role in the Ukraine-Russia war changing, given that Israel has been in the crosshairs since the beginning of the war?
So, the answer, how much can this coalition govern or succeed, is a big question, because in the beginning we thought, okay, this is going to be a coalition for 4 years. But when you see the negotiations, and everyone expected it to be only a week and a month, and then he asked for 10 more days, and now we have another week and a half, and every day another party has new demands. It comes into a question how much this coalition can survive, or the big question, how much can Netanyahu feel that he can survive or rule this kind of coalition when every day another partner will come with a new demand. Let's say, for example, Netanyahu can be in Washington, D.C. meeting Biden, and a member of his coalition suddenly announces plans to build settlements, or Itamar Ben-Gvir, who will be the Homeland Defense Minister, will say, I'm going to Al-Aqsa. So these kind of events might happen every week or every day. And the question will be always how much Netanyahu can go through these kinds of things. Okay. The last question regarding Ukraine. At the end, Netanyahu, in all his interviews, is saying, I will think about our policy towards Ukraine, maybe bring them weapons or things like that. But at the end, when you see his conversation today with Putin, I think no one thinks that Netanyahu is the guy who will go all the way towards Ukraine. And you need to remember one important thing. At this point, he doesn't have international pressure to do so. I mean, the US or European countries do not pressure Israel to give Ukraine weapons or defensive weapons. And that's why I think probably we will see Israel staying the same position as it was in the past. We might see Netanyahu as a mediator, or trying to send messages between Ukraine and Russia. But again, no one thinks that Israel is going all the way towards Ukraine and suddenly send them weapons.
All right, so that stand may not change as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned, but the biggest question remains, how stable is this government really likely to be? On that note, Amish Stein, thanks very much for speaking to WION.
Thank you very much.